Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you as always for coming by. Let me start with some macro thoughts, some real Yellen fireworks late last night. She brushed aside the inflation mystery and is eyeing a rate hike before the end of the year. Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen acknowledged that the fall in inflation this year was a bit of a mystery, but suggested that the central bank was on course to raise interest rates again in 2017 nonetheless. We continue to expect that the ongoing strength of the economy will warrant gradual increases in rates, she told a press conference, and said that they will slowly begin to pare its bond holdings next month. And this was enough to send the dollar up, bond yields higher, gold down, pretty big moves actually. Let me just interlude with some home thoughts. I like this by Tracy Emin via the Saatchi Gallery. The last great adventure is you. I like this photograph from ASAYF Kenya from the air, which took me back to the view from the top of Ololokwe Mountain. We visited that via helicopter ride with Tropicair and Sirikoi, and I've got that footage if you care to take a look. It's a sacred mountain, and it's pretty remarkable up there. Bill Browder, proud to speak to future leaders of the world at the Westminster School, London, about Sergei Magnitsky, Putin in Russia. And that's where I was at school, right there. Political reflections. Trump at a lunch with African leaders refers to the non-existent country of Namibia. He said he was honored to host a luncheon for African leaders this afternoon. Great discussions on the challenges and opportunities facing our nations today, he said. He also told African leaders that his friends go there to get rich. Awkward silence follows. US President Trump was met with silence from African leaders Wednesday when he tried to congratulate them for the economic progress the continent has made. Africa has tremendous business potential. I have so many friends going to your countries trying to get rich, Trump told them at a luncheon Wednesday in New York. I congratulate you. They're spending a lot of money, he said. Trump reportedly paused for laughter or applause, but none ensued. Meanwhile, here's a picture of President Museveni of Uganda and President Trump of America from Samira Salwani. And then Emmanuel Macron's Twitter feed caught my attention. Here he's seen meeting with President Hassan Rouhani. Clearly there is a significant difference between how Europe is looking at Iran and how the Americans are. Then he met with Malala dans son combat courageux et nécessaire pour l'éducation des filles dans le monde. Couldn't agree with him more. I just thought to myself, he really is showing leadership on the global stage. Regarding the statement made by President Donald Trump at the UN, it was remarkable, so said Sergei Lavrov. Take a look at that link, that's from the ministry in Russia. Over the weekend I wrote my piece, which was a headline, "Just Screaming Came Across the Sky." I was talking about North Korea, and Donald Trump branded Kim Jong-un a rocket man, but in 2006 The Economist had put his father, Kim Jong-il, on its cover with the same title. In War of Elton John lyrics, Kim Jong-un calls Trump honky cat, Borowitz report, Pyongyang. In what some security experts fear could be a high-stakes war of Elton John lyrics minutes after Donald Trump called Kim Jong-un rocket man, the North Korean dictator responded by calling Trump honky cat. As he issued the Elton John-based attack, Kim warned that he had an extensive collection of the singer-songwriter's albums and was prepared to weaponize every lyric in them. The White House immediately struck back, warning Kim that any further provocation involving an Elton John lyric, especially Tiny Dancer, will be seen as an act of war. But any hope that Kim would be silenced was short-lived. Responding to the White House, Kim stated, "I see the bitch is back," before signing off, "Goodbye, yellow-wigged toad." I thought that was wrong again. Just in North Korea, says Donald Trump's threat is the sound of a dog barking. Go back to my piece, which was a play on Gravity's Rainbow, in which a mysterious device named the Schwarzgerät was slated to be installed in a rocket with the serial number 00000. I was referring to Pynchon, who's describing the flight of a rocket, but it is a curve each of them feels unmistakably. It is the parabola. They must have guessed, once or twice guessed, and refused to believe that everything, always, collectively, had been moving toward that purified shape latent in the sky, that shape of no surprise, no second chance, no return. One of the strategies of the pre-regime change moment has been to demonize the other leader, and front and center in Kim's mind must be the image of Saddam Hussein on the occasion of Eid ul-Adha, being hung by his neck, and Muammar Gaddafi meeting his death after having been sodomized with a bottle. When you view things from Kim the Rocket Man's perspective, you might appreciate that far from being illogical, he is in fact being ruthlessly logical, and he is speaking the language his adversaries understand lucidly. 10 million folks in Seoul, just 60 kilometers from the border, 28,500 US soldiers are all in the line of fire. And I was also saying that it's unlikely that the West has anything to offer China that can compensate them for the loss of their hinterland, their buffer, and their instrument of attack. When you look at the geopolitical alignment, it is entirely unlikely that the West has anything to offer the Chinese that can compensate them for the loss of their hinterland, their buffer, and their instrument of attack. I like this Schneemann's up to and including her limits. It's pretty arresting. Late 70s pioneered performance and visual art that addressed sexual politics and female agency with clear-eyed, unflinching rigor. Works such as Meat Joy, where participants roll around in a room full of raw meat and trash, still have the power to shock. Haaretz, everyone expected Syria to be his quagmire. 2 years on, Putin's success story. Indeed. Fed forecasts still signal another 2017 rate hike and 3 more in 2018. Odds of another Fed rate hike this year jumped to 63% following the FOMC meeting from 50% before. US 10-year Treasury yields rose to 2.27%, the highest since August the 16th. 2-year yields are at a 9-year high. Currency markets, euro-dollar, which was above 120 before the Fed announcement, fell sharply below 119. We're back at 119.09. Dollar index 92.58. Japanese yen 112.46. Swiss franc 0.9719. The pound 134.89. The Australian dollar, which got above 0.81, 0.7961 last. India rupee 64.495, South Korean won 1132.90, so still softish. Brazilian real 313.22, Egyptian pound 17.6470, and the South African rand 13.3493. It's softened up from 13. Euro plunged below 119 following a more hawkish than expected Fed. We're last at 119.08. Dollar index key level remains that level I've been speaking about, 93.50. We're at 92.58 last time I had a look. Apple falls after analyst report indicates weak iPhone 8 demand. Apple Inc. shares fell the most in more than a month after an analyst said demand for the iPhone 8 is substantially lower than for earlier models of the world's best-selling smartphone. Pre-order volumes in the US for the iPhone 8 fell below those for the iPhone 7 and iPhone 6. Rosenblatt Securities analyst Yun Zhang said in a note to clients demand in China is even lower. Zhong has a neutral rating on Apple shares. Consumers pre-ordered 1.5 million handsets on Chinese retail website JD.com in the first 3 days, compared with about 3.5 million for the comparable period of iPhone 7 orders, so it's sharply lower. Commodity markets, WTI crude oil closed above $50 for the first time since July. We're currently at $50.41. Market has become very bullish. I remain a bear. I don't think there's any reason for this runaway performance that we've seen of late. I think it's more of a macro dollar-related move, which now has to reverse because the dollar's actually strengthened. Gold, $12.94.57. I'll put up a 6-month chart. That's really come off those levels where we'd pushed into the sort of 1350 area. Seems to be one of the favorite ETFs recently. This baby is absolutely lit, says David Inglis. Sub-Saharan Africa, the jig is out for Congo's embattled president's foreign policy among the world leaders expected in New York this week for the annual meeting of the UN General Assembly is one who should technically already be retired. Congolese President Joseph Kabila's constitutionally mandated 2-term limit came to an end last year. Yet he has used one contrivance after another to delay elections for his successor to cling to power, cracking down mercilessly on political opponents and pro-democracy activists and dispatching his security services to gun down more than 170 peaceful protesters in 2015-2016. Yet in meetings at the UN this week, the government of the DR Congo will try to convince world leaders that Kabila is committed to holding elections and relinquishing power, if only is given more time. The consequence of blindly accepting such empty promises could be devastating for the Congolese people. World leaders gathered in New York this week should voice their support for a democratic Congo and call on Kabila to step aside. Remaining silent as elections are repeatedly delayed will only embolden him in his strategy of repression, violence, and theft. For now, he's still in control, after a fashion. Held bilateral discussion with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in New York on sidelines of the UN General Assembly, that's Yoweri Museveni, fortunately is over there at the moment, whilst all kinds of problems are in Uganda, because of the attempt to be president for life. Statement: South Africa successfully places 2.5 billion in new notes amidst a clamour for yield, which recently saw investors lapping up bonds from a country some couldn't even place on a nation map. South Africa's latest debt sale had a lukewarm reception. The nation had to pay more to sell 10-year Euro bonds than it did on 12-year debt last year, managed to attract only $2.1 billion in bids for the $1 billion offered. By comparison, Ukraine received bids for 3 times the $3 billion it offered in its first foray into the market since Russia invaded the Crimea in 2014. Tajikistan got $3.1 billion of orders in a debut sale of $500 million of securities. South Africa sold $1 billion of 10-year debt to yield 4.85%, or 50 basis points more than the country paid on $2 billion of 12-year securities a year ago. It also issued $1.5 billion of 30-year notes at a yield of 5.65%, for which investors placed $3.2 billion of orders. Relatively muted demand. Investors would simply require more yield to go into the turmoil of the South African uncertainty. This is what is actually a very poor bid-to-cover ratio. Train spotter: the end of law, the end of democracy. President Jacob Zuma, hounded by 783 corruption charges and saved by the immunity conferred on him by his office, will do anything to stay out of jail. South Africa's fate depends on how this existential nightmare is resolved. This country is always 5 minutes to midnight. Another minute is about to tick by. South African oil shares up 10.29% this year. Dollar versus rand. The rand is softer at 13.3501. Egyptian pound 17.634. And I saw a report saying that Egypt has become the most favoured destination in Africa. And you can understand why. Sisi, for all his faults, took the right decisions at the right time. Devalued the currency, took the pain. Nigerian all shares up 31.01% year-to-date. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 36.49% year-to-date. Tanzanian newspaper suspended for insulting the president. They published a letter. The offending letter said that Magufuli claims to be a patriot, but questions the patriotism of anyone who opposes him. This is hypocritical. This newspaper has been shut. Abbasi said the paper had received several warnings. Daily has been shuttered on several occasions in the past. The offending letter said that Magufuli claims to be a patriot, questions the patriotism of anyone who opposes him. This is hypocritical. Tanzania's president ordered that a wall is built around Tanzanite mines, says government will start buying stones. This is to counter smuggling. He said he had directed the central bank to start buying the precious stone to boost reserves. All Tanzanite gemstones will be controlled and will pass through one gate, and he, Magufuli, ordered the Central Bank of Tanzania to take part in the Tanzanite buying trade. Let's move on to Kenya, where we had the full ruling read out. I listened to it for a while and then gave up. Key finding against the election board on Wednesday was that officials had announced results before being able to verify them. Not every irregularity, not every infraction of the law is enough to nullify an election. Were it so, there would not be any election in this country, or even the world, that would withstand judicial scrutiny, said Chief Justice David Maraga. But he said these discrepancies were widespread. The election did not meet the simple test. We are unable to validate the result. Judge Philomena Milu said the forms should have been quickly available for inspection, noting officials that thousands of forms from polling stations were still unavailable 4 days after the official results were announced. The board cannot therefore be said to have verified the results. It is an inexcusable contravention of the Election Act. Non-compliance or failure by the board to do as ordered must be held against it. If they did not open their computer servers despite being served with a court order. The problem, in my view, is that the Supreme Court have stopped short of demanding change, in personnel change of the IEBC, but if we have the same personnel, we're probably going to have the same scenario. And they said if the scenario is the same, they're going to reject the result. The Economist, Kenya's Supreme Court, explains why it annulled last month's presidential poll. As an indictment of the Electoral Commission and a statement of the supremacy of law, it was searing and inspiring. The constitutional mandate placed on the Commission, said David Maraga, the Chief Justice, is a heavy yet noble one that it had failed to fulfill. But on the question of whether the poll was actually rigged, as the opposition alleges, or as a guide to how to hold another one, it was less definitive. That's the point I'm making. The bigger problem now is how to organize a new election. By throwing out the election on a matter of process rather than substance, the court has set a high bar for the Commission to surmount in its repeat, says Michael Chege of the University of Nairobi. OT Morpho, the French company which provided the controversial voter verification and transmissions technology, says it will need until October 26th at the earliest to set up the new servers, nearly a fortnight later than the Commission's proposed date of October 17. Mr. Odinga says that unless the entire Commission is reformed, there should be no election at all. Should the Commission fail to organize an acceptable new poll, Kenya will face a constitutional crisis. The country's economy, which has already slowed markedly this year thanks to the election, could be knocked for six. Frustration on both sides will mount. That is a risky prospect in a country where the memory of the election in 2007, after which some 1,400 people were killed, is still fresh. John Aglinby of the Financial Times, who will carry the can for the failures? Can the issues be resolved in time to hold a repeat election? Absolutely. Good question. I wrote a piece on the 4th of September when I was saying the court ruling impacts the economy, and I said then the judges ordered a new vote to be held within 60 days. Given the damning nature of the verdict with respect to the IEBC, a court ruled that it had failed, neglected, or refused to conduct a presidential election in a manner consistent with the dictates of the Constitution. It's unclear to me how the 60-day deadline is met. East Africa's family-owned retailers are struggling to adapt to a changing business. Kenya's second-largest supermarket, Tuskys, has come to the rescue of its larger rival, Nakumatt, to save the latter from shuttering. The rescue came after Nakumatt, East Africa's largest retailer, failed to secure a $75 million financing deal quickly enough to avoid its suppliers cutting it off. Rows of empty shelves have become a familiar sight in Nakumatt stores, and it has lost customers in droves to rivals. The fruitless hunt for equity financing in exchange for a 25% stake meant Nakumatt never got the $75 million it hoped to raise to help towards settling debt in excess of $180 million. Instead, the retailer will now access supplies from Tuskys' supply chain-based system based on the goodwill the latter has with its dealers. Kenya's formal retail sector, which has market penetration of 30%, is dominated by family-owned enterprises such as Nakumatt, Tuskys, Naivas, Chandarana, and Eastmat. Botswana's Choppies and Carrefour, a French multinational retailer. At the height of its success, Nakumatt grossed about $700 million in annual turnover and was seen as illustrative of the fast-growing middle class driving retail sector growth in Kenya. I say, Nakumatt is a cautionary tale and even a mind-boggling one. It still remains an enigma wrapped in a conundrum as to how it burned through over $150 million, where their business model was built on supplier credit. I believe family exerted a strong hold on the business and was simply unable to keep up with the fast-moving retail sector. This is a classic case of a family business being unable to institutionalize itself. Kenya shilling 103.30, Nairobi all share up 23.58% year to date, NSE 20 up 18.75% year to date. Thank you for stopping by.